In June, Sarah and I attended a conference called Differentiation for All Learners. And at that conference, we both attended a range of different presentations that gave us each different insights into how we can differentiate our classroom and more effectively meet the diverse needs of the students that we meet on a daily basis. Today, we'd like to share some of those strategies and our insights with you and help you to develop some ideas about what you might be able to use in your classroom and teach you some tools that you might want to use and try. Later on, Sarah will show you how to produce a screencast and how she's using screencasting to flip her own English classroom. How this has changed her teaching, but more importantly, how it's changing the learning that's occurring in the classroom. So she'll go through why to flip, give her personal experience, and show you the how and the software and the tools that we can use to do that. Before that, I'd like to go through a little bit more of the theory of differentiation and some strategies that we can use in everyday lessons to meet the needs of a diverse group of students. We know that students are all very different and come into the classroom with different understandings and leave the classroom having learnt a totally different level of content and complexity. How do we approach that when we have some students who are desperate to be invisible and bury their head in the sand, avoiding learning at all costs? And we also have students who are very happy to take the limelight, show their skills and their knowledge at every opportunity. We know that there is a wide range of ability levels and skill levels in every classroom, and how we close this gap or meet the needs at the different levels is a constant challenge, and one that when I arrived at this conference I really had no idea how to deal with the problem of differentiating my teaching without providing multiple worksheets and multiple activities and multiple different lessons for every learner to happen concurrently. Now I know that it's not a different lesson for every learner. It's the same lesson. It's the same activity for every level of learning and every level of ability. But the activity needs to be designed to provide multiple access points. And small aspects of my teaching need to change to remove obstacles for some students that I didn't even realise were there. So it's not different lessons for every type of student, every different student. It's not writing individual learning plans or multiple worksheets or multiple tests or multiple activities. And it's not changing the learning intentions. All students have the same intention and the same goal, but how they achieve that goal may be different. It is just good teaching, making small modifications and being mindful of the different learners that you have to teach in your classroom and things that can detract or limit their ability to learn from the content or the ideas that you'd like them to. Chalk and talk is the hardest type of teaching to differentiate because things are delivered at one pace and one speed from one person to a room full of listeners. And flipped learning does help that straight away by allowing students to watch and re-watch at their own pace. But in the classroom, how could you offer more access than simply delivering or explaining or being the provider of content? The multiple lecturers that we heard from encouraged collaborative learning and cooperative learning so that there are multiple teachers available to each student, and those teachers are in fact their peers. Another thing that I learnt from the conference was how to align the way that I deliver content with the students' brains, rather than actually being in conflict with how their brains are working at particular times in their development. And then lots of strategies about how to effectively question students so that they are encouraged to participate and engage with the content, and reducing the ability for them to opt out of classroom questions. I'm going to start with cooperative hands-on learning, which I think is probably was one of the light bulb moments for me. I'll move on to some memory tools and some obstacles that we may not realise that we're putting in front of students and preventing them from learning. And then if time, we'll go on to question. So in biology particularly, we use Edrollo and we flip our learning that way. So delivering the content through an external provider that the students watch at home allows us to do more collaborative activities in the classroom, and that gives me an opportunity to assess where the students are at and any misconceptions and obstacles that they've met, any ideas I need to correct, and opens the dialogue and allows students to ask questions in a very comfortable and trusting environment. So that's how we use it in biology. But to run a cooperative, collaborative environment effectively, you need to really explicitly teach some of the skills involved. As adults, we tend to think that it's obvious. Some of the things that you need to be able to do to cooperate effectively and to collaborate and to work as a team are intuitive, but they're not necessarily intuitive to students. So that there needs to be some explicit teaching. And I suggest at the beginning of this explicit teaching, you start with the why. Why would we do a cooperative, collaborative task when we could just tell you what you need to know? And the teacher could just deliver you the information. And the reason, the rationale is that students actually retain an awful lot more of what they hear from their students and what they discover themselves than what we tell them as teachers or as parents, or what they read, or even what they copy down. So there's some real science behind the why collaborative activities actually work more effectively in building understanding and learning for the students. So it's a good idea to start with that if your students aren't used to doing collaborative activities in your class. Some of the key skills, almost the rules to collaboration, we'll go through in a minute with a bit of an activity that I'll run with you. But students need to be taught how to interact face-to-face with other people. For some, this is very easy. For others, it's very difficult. The first thing you need to do is sit them down, and we'll do this together, knee to knee, face to face with a partner. And remove any barriers. So if there's a notebook, a pen, an iPhone, anything that they've got that they can fiddle with, that becomes a barrier to collaboration. So we'd like the students to not have any of those barriers and actually be in very close proximity with their partner to start with. So sit them knee to knee, remove anything that is blocking the cooperation, and ask the students just to look into each other's eyes for 10 seconds. Now this is deliberately uncomfortable and not how young people interact these days very often, but it is really important that they develop they can overcome the discomfort and they develop some trust in each other. So sit them face to face, and then we'll do an activity that helps them to develop some social skills, to break some ice, develop some trust. And then as you set some rules around collaboration, you need to teach them how to process ideas as a group rather than as a set of individuals working on a task in the same area. So they all need to be able to share ideas, to look at the same problem, and to have equity in how much they contribute, how much they do, and how much they then produce at the end or present. The old-fashioned idea of the misconception of group work is, okay, well, you can be the scribe and you can research and I'll do the thinking and pull it together and he'll go and present. And that isn't collaboration, that's delegation. Teaching students that that's not what we're looking for, and that what we want is for, maybe if there's a group of 4 students, for each one to contribute a quarter of the ideas, a quarter of the final product. That will help them to really understand what effective collaboration is. And as they force themselves to do that, they will start to see that despite their ideas about who's the smartest and who's the strongest and who's the one who's best at writing, they may actually discover that it's not quite as they thought. And their ideas are as good as anyone else's, or maybe someone else's ideas are better, and that might be news to them. So it's a huge learning curve and it takes some practice. But we do also need to teach students to listen actively and not just wait for their turn to share their ideas, but really engage with what someone else is saying and think about what other people are saying. And then the final thing is really for you as a teacher to impose, and it's individual accountability. You must ensure that there's a framework for each student to be responsible for their proportion of the research or the thinking or the writing or the presenting, or all of those parts. They're not allowed to be a passenger in the activity. And that requires some pre-teaching and some structure around the lesson. Once the students are familiar with that, then these skills are not only going to pay dividends in the activity, but there will also be lifelong skills, as obviously collaboration and teamwork are critical in the workplace and once students become adults. Now I'm going to stop recording this part of the video and run an activity with you that demonstrates a bit of an icebreaker that I've used and I learned at the conference and I found really useful in introducing collaboration with my Year 12s and my Year 10s in the last few weeks of term. So I'll stop now and enjoy.